Hello and welcome to Furious Driving. Now, chicken tax is back, baby, and that's not a good thing. They say if we don't learn from our mistakes, history is doomed to repeat itself. And 1964 is a long time ago, but some things never change. And the current US administration is in the process of bringing in a new chicken tax on April the 3rd, that's later this week. And this time, not just affecting commercial vehicles, but this time every vehicle. And that's a bad thing for everyone on every side. So what was the chicken tax? And what were the consequences? And what might happen this time? And as Donald Trump is so annoyed that we here in Britain and Europe don't buy American cars, why don't we want Detroit's finest? And to help illustrate that last point, and in case you're new to the channel, this is my very own 2002 Ford Crown Victoria Police Interceptor, which I imported from America of my own free will, and actually adore, despite there are, well, certain, well, drawbacks to owning something like this. You really have to want a car like this, to be perfectly honest. Okay, so let's start by grabbing a cup of coffee and illustrating one of those drawbacks, and we can settle down and talk about some of the stuff. So, what could be more American than taking an American car through a McDonald's drive-thru? A doddle, you might say, except, yeah, transit vans go through here, but they've got the steering wheel on the right-hand side, which makes life a little tricky.
What can I get for you?
Just a large black coffee, please.
A large what, sorry?
Black coffee.
White coffee?
No, black.
Anything else for you?
No, that's all, thank you.
Hello, mate.
Hello, you all right?
Yeah,
I can't quite reach, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ow. That was convenient. That is one of the minor issues of running a car like this in the UK. I'm just reverse parking this into a space, which apparently you can't do in a lot of America. Get a ticket for that, someone actually posted on Blue Sky the other day. I've no clue where the back of this car is. It's so far behind me, it's in a different postcode. Right, so I've got myself a black coffee, I've got my American car. Let's have a chat. Okay, chicken tax. Let's begin back at the beginning. I'm here, that's a very good place to start. The original chicken tax was brought in by Lyndon B. Johnson in 1964, and this was the crescendo of the Chicken War. The US had taxed potato starch, of all things, dextrin and brandy, so France and Germany retaliated with their own retaliatory taxes on imported chickens from America. Now, post-World War II, in Europe, chicken was still quite a rare luxury commodity, whereas in America, chicken farming had ramped up to industrial levels and was now a glut of the stuff, and they could barely give it away, so they could export it for next to nothing. So, just 2 months after taking office, Lyndon B. Johnson dropped the A-bomb of the chicken war. He imposed the 25% import tariff on all commercial vehicles coming in from abroad. So pickups and panel vans, arguably a direct strike against the Volkswagen Type 2, which was becoming increasingly popular because there weren't really many direct rivals against it in the homegrown American market. In fact, it later emerged that Johnson had done a deal with the American Auto Workers Union in order to help him win, in order to take action to hold the VW back. The other taxes were all later dropped, but the truck tax remains to this day, leaving American trucks and pickups on an independent evolutionary direction, with no natural predators to direct or improve the breed, or to pick off the weakest of the flock. Wow, it's getting warm in here. So while European vans were developed and innovated and improved, and significantly were designed to be big enough to take international standards like a Euro pallet or a 1-ton aggregate sack, but get better and better economy, fit down small British and French roads, US trucks just got bigger and bigger. V6s are seen as the weedy option, and 7.4 Chevy V8 pickups and the 8-litre V10 Dodge Ram are kind of seen as just normal, not out of the ordinary. But with nowhere else paying as little for fuel and almost every other country's roads being smaller, these massive beasts really are unique to the US. The rare exception being the Ford Ranger, which is a really large truck here but tiny in America, but does make it both sides of the Atlantic. So the end result after 60 years is that Detroit still makes trucks that are only suitable for the US, and everyone else has trucks that can be sold all over the world, including the US, and the US arms of the Japanese makers have US specific trucks just for this market. These new tariffs, if they happen, I say this because there is always volatility with this administration, and it currently looks like they will, though it's only 2 days away, it'll be worse for everybody, but worse really for the American public. The chicken tax 2025 is all-encompassing. Cars, SUVs, minivans, all commercials, as well as key components, things like engines, transmissions and electrical parts, and more. Except, as we've already seen, American automakers build a lot of their cars in Canada and Mexico. And I don't know if you've seen this on the news, but neighbourly relations on the North American continent are not at their best at the moment. And the USMCA agreement might initially be tariff-free, but that won't last long, as they're currently trying to work out how to determine which components come from where, and they can add appropriate taxes later. This means some American cars are going to become more expensive in their home market. Makers might be able to absorb some of those tariffs, but not 25%. I'm going to find somewhere shady to park. This is boiling hot. Meanwhile, Trump says he couldn't care less because if prices of foreign cars are going up, they're going to buy American cars. He says this will strengthen and protect the US auto industry, but cars are already expensive in 2025. Raising prices up by 25% would obviously price many cars and the buyers out of the market. So in simplistic terms, it sounds like it would work, maybe, but in reality, probably not. A lot of Americans seem unaware of how tariffs work. They think the sender pays the fee. But it's not, it's the importer, the person receiving the product. So yes, import sales do fall, and it hurts the foreign importer. Yay, great, jingoism and xenophobia for the win! Except those imports don't just go from the importer direct to the buyer. There's the shipping company across the sea, the dock workers, the truck and the train transport people, the car dealers, the sales staff, mechanics, even the cleaners in the dealership. And if they are not earning, they're not spending, so the wider economy around those places are hit as well. And let's not even start with tit-for-tat tariffs going back in the opposite direction. Currently, the only company making 100% of its US market cars in the US is Tesla. But they aren't exactly pulling their weight at the moment, and if you want to check my previous video for what could be happening to them in their future, well, not great. But up next, in terms of volume, is actually Honda. They make 75% of their US market cars in the US, which puts them ahead of Ford and GM, so they're already ahead of the game there, ahead of the domestic makers. And while they could bring manufacturing inshore, the cost of building a factory is huge, as is the cost of training a workforce, and both of those take time. It could be a couple of years before a new facility is up and running. Potentially those tariffs could have gone away again before it even opens. And with car makers working on knife-edge margins, that's investment they can't afford to waste and should be putting into global R&D. If the US arm of one of the big three starts to teeter, they could contract and pull out of entire other markets to save money. Could this be the end of Ford of Europe, for example? We've already seen Holden, which is the Australian GM brand, being cancelled a couple of years ago, very sadly. There could be more. Just think how many jobs could be lost across multiple continents. Now, my knowledge of American car dealers is largely second-hand, although I have personally been ripped off by them twice. Once by a guy who literally sold a car I had agreed to make a purchase on whilst I was having a paid-for inspection done. And secondly, with this very car, I was told by the dealer it was completely rust-free. In fact, it was not. It was made of cheese. But second-hand knowledge from friends in America, from YouTube videos, American car dealers do seem to be pretty keen on doing a bit of a price gouge whenever they can. Oh, this is good. I can pretend I'm doing like a highway watch thing just here. Yeah, I'm highway patrol now. How'd you like them apples? So as I was saying, American car dealers will use any excuse to put prices up across the board, because because most people don't know where particular models come from, so they can claim anything is foreign built and whack an extra few percent on. Now, foreign makers are of course already prepared for this, as they've already built factories, so the bigger makers can circumvent these new tariffs. But companies like BMW and Mercedes actually build some of the models in the US and export them back to Europe. So if and when retaliatory tariffs come in from this side of the Atlantic, those cars could wind up costing more here. Great. But why don't they just make the entire range in each place and save shipping, I hear you ask? Well, a car has a lot of parts. Some are shared, but many are unique to each model. And I can't believe they've not worked out the precise costing of this down to the fraction of a penny, but it will be cheaper to make those parts and the car in one place, one time, and not have to make those parts multiple times around the world and ship big, easily damaged parts around the world. Because moving a car is easy. It rolls, it's on wheels. A dashboard, for example, is huge, it's floppy, and it's delicate. So moving it is a careful and expensive job. So in short, American consumers will pay more immediately, likely for the longer term too. Innovation and improvement will suffer globally as R&D budgets could have to be split for US and the rest of the world. The EV incentives being dropped in America, that might slow down development and uptake of EVs and alternative fuel vehicles. You might not be upset about that, but a lot of people will be looking at that for the future. But that will specifically hurt American research people, because a lot of money is spent on R&D on those things in America. That will leave those industries falling by the wayside and behind their foreign rivals, and American car makers, of course, will be in the dust when it comes to innovation and development as the rest of the planet moves ahead in battery technology, fuel efficiency, new materials, all that kind of stuff. When the US does emerge from the side of this latest chicken tax, they will be lagging behind and even less able to compete with their cars against a global market. And it's not just new cars that will be effective. When new cars get more expensive, the price of old cars, used stock, is driven up as well. So the consumer at every level is going to be hit. And the other place that hits old cars, and I'm sure you know about the 25-year import rule, car fans in America can't import interesting cars until they're 25 years old. That's the car, not the car fan. The new tariff also hits personal imports as well. So classic cars will be into bad news for American car enthusiasts. Sorry guys. But maybe good news for everyone else, because normally when you hit 25 years old of a particular iconic model, suddenly the price shoots up as all the Americans want to try and import it. They finally get their hands on it. Maybe that won't be happening. Maybe that is one good thing for the rest of us. So why don't we, and by we I mean Britain and the rest of Europe, buy American cars? Because they've tried a few times to sell them here and almost never with any success. Jeep seems to be the only long-term success story. Going back to the early and middle 20th century, McLaughlin of Ontario, Canada again, built right-hand drive export models of luxury Buick cars, importing them to the UK. And importing dealers like Lendrum and Hartman in London, very big in the 1970s, sold ranges of all the luxurious and exciting models of the Yank tanks. But this was when American cars were lavish and exciting and offered a unique alternative to European luxury cars. But there are a few stereotypes every Facebook bore who's never sat in one can tell you with conviction. They're too big, they're too thirsty, they don't go around corners, they're badly made. And comparing a 1970s Lincoln to a European Granada, the first three are definitely true, but let's be honest, most cars made in the 1970s, apart from the Japanese, were thrown together by an angry workforce who would rather have been down the pub. But perception and reality haven't changed that much in half a century. With laxer rules on fuel efficiency, and even though Americans complain about the current fuel prices, they still pay a fraction of Europeans when it comes to a gallon of petrol. And there's little incentive to make US cars get better MPG when the prices are still low. Over there, 30 MPG is considered good, but here, that's frowned upon. So when people say, what does this Crown Victoria get? And I sort of trying to say a gloss on it. Ooh, 30 MPG on the motorway. And they go, ooh, really? Yeah, I don't tell them about the 19 around town. Bear in mind, my Mercedes C-Class Estate, which is a lot faster than this car, that gets around 45 MPG. So even smaller US exports, like the 2-litre Chrysler Neon, which is sold as the Dodge and the Plymouth over in America, from when Chrysler made an ill-fated attempt to crack Europe in the early noughties, that got 30 MPG, but its 0 to 60 was 11 seconds, thanks to a very lacklustre automatic gearbox. The PT Cruiser, same time, interesting car, great retro concept, but lived up to all the stereotypes. Cheap-feeling plastics, bad MPG, rubbish to drive. It looked cool, which is what American cars do very well, but just didn't have the substance to back it up. And that quality problem has been an ongoing issue. Maybe the last 10 years perhaps, things have improved with the American market cars. European cars, even the most basic models, I'm going to improve Korean and Japanese cars here as well. The materials and the fit and finish have just improved so drastically, and they've left a lot of American cars behind. In about 2006, I think it was, maybe a couple of years after that, one of my friends went on holiday to Florida. He rented a Chrysler Sebring convertible. And the video he showed everyone when he got home wasn't the rides at Wally World, but it was how badly misaligned the power hood was and how it nearly tore itself apart every time he put it up or down. And this reputation has kind of stuck. Now, I love this Crown Victoria. It's one of my favourite cars to drive. Brilliant, but terrible in certain ways, like this plastic dashboard. I'm a big fan of the Bosch TV series and the books, but having watched that TV show, the first time I drove this car, all the squeaks, all the rattles were all exactly the same. It was like I was riding along with Harry and J. Edgar in this thing, and I can close my eyes in a Crown Victoria and I can just hear the audio of a Crown Victoria going down the road. And I know it's one of these from all the creaks and things. Now, I say all this as someone who is an American car fan. There is a difference in the materials and the quality and the attitude behind them. American cars seem to be more about making an impression than anything else. Make a splash and then replace it with something brighter next year. And that kind of crass boldness just doesn't go over well this side of the Atlantic. So a lot of US models have bigger engines, bigger footprints. It's no surprise buyers over here don't want something like that, and I think it's a compromise. Someone buying a Focus or a Corolla who can drive it down any street, park in any space, get 50 mpg, isn't going to want, like I have to do with this thing, to plan every route just in case there's a width restrictor or a tight bit you physically can't get through, or a parking space you're not going to fit in. I know a couple of roads, like in the next village or so, I can't take this car down because it's only just wide enough for this car, and if anything comes the other way, we are backing up and it's going to be an absolute nightmare. And there's a multi-story in my local town where I've never taken this car to, no matter how practical and useful that would be, because it just wouldn't make it up and down the ramps. It wouldn't come home undamaged. Now, Chevy did actually make a big attempt to crack Europe about 15 years ago. They wound up owning Daewoo Cars. That was a Korean company who'd started in Europe in 1995 with a lot of fanfare, selling facelifted previous generation Vauxhalls and Opels, ultimately failing, and they were selling rebadged, facelifted, low-end Korean cars to Europe with a Chevy badge on the front. So we finally had a compact and economical Chevrolet, but they looked and felt like low-quality Japanese, Korean cars, and they didn't drive like something you'd want to do for fun. The only gems in that particular lineup were the Camaro and the Corvette, which you could finally buy as official imports, although they were still only left-hand drive. And despite loving those cars, they are fantastic, fun muscle cars, lots of shouting and noise and glamour and excitement. And I would love a C4 Corvette, really would like one, despite knowing everything that's wrong with it. They have all the same drawbacks of everything else I've just said, plus left-hand drive, but they also come with the baggage of association. So Corvette owners need to buy your car and then go and order yourself some very big bright white trainers and some cut-off denim shorts and a bus pass and a set of golf clubs. And Camaro buyers need to go and get yourselves a mullet and some non-ironic chewing tobacco. These are, of course, very sweeping generalisations. If, though, they'd made those muscle cars in right-hand drive, they would have been a success. They were the cars people wanted. Not everybody, but enough people would have wanted those. But they didn't. Ford did, though, with the latest Mustangs, and they've been a hit. People love it. Again, not everyone's cup of tea, but the people who want those can finally go into a dealership and say, I want to buy a Mustang, put down your card and walk out or drive out with a right-hand drive European or UKized Mustang. Brilliant. Now, Jeep inadvertently had a success with the Cherokee for this right-hand drive reason. They'd built a right drive model for the post office in America to do sort of curbside deliveries. And that gave them a platform that was ready for the UK and Japan. Admittedly, the diesel became the big seller here rather than the straight six because of MPG. But the car sold and it built a brand. Everyone knew Jeep anyway, that came along, it cemented it. Now later on, Ford led the way with the world car with the Mondeo in the early 90s. But even then, Ford America took the near-perfect Mark I Mondeo, massively restyled it. US buyers, though, they thought it was too small. In the rest of the world, it's a good size, good interior space, good boot, and it'll fit down pretty much any road you want to drive down. And the rest of the world followed the template with that kind of size car, which has grown a bit over the last couple of years, and building world cars to a high standard. But not the US. They've stuck with bigger is better, and the top sellers are consistently the big pickups. However, subsequent European invaders to the US from a US brand, the Focus and Fiesta, were huge successes, incredibly popular. European build quality, design and handling characteristics shone through until Ford foolishly cancelled them. But that does show there is a strong appetite for well-made, nimble, practical cars that aren't huge in America. Not everyone in America wants a massive gas-guzzling pickup truck, believe it or not. Coming back to the UK, it really does seem like the US companies have just phoned it in with any attempts to sell cars here, either offering cheap or nasty cast-offs, or not bothering to adapt to a local taste, either in terms of materials and equipment, or the basics of putting the steering wheel on the right side of the car. The Chrysler 300C came here as a luxury car. It drove well because it was basically all Mercedes parts under the skin, but the leather felt plasticky, the plastics felt cheap and hollow, and it was nothing like the Mercedes it was based on. Now, my passenger window has just broken. Talking about American build quality, yeah, the window has just quit on me. Okay, we'll do this with wind noise then. So the thing is, if American car makers want to sell cars in Europe, the key is to understand the market, which they've really failed to do so far. We got a speeder. They've got to build cars that drive as well as a Focus, have an interior as good as a Mercedes or an Audi, and sell for a sensible price. And so far, they've failed to do that. So, in many ways, it's kind of their own fault that it didn't work out. Give people what they want, and they will buy it. In the short and the long term, just trying to price out the competition doesn't work. It hurts everyone. So, in the long and indeed the short term, trying to price the competition out of the market just doesn't really work. It just puts up prices across the board, hurts everyone, breaks global supply chains. It hurts parts makers on both sides because people can no longer sell things they've been selling for a long time. It hurts everybody on every side. There are really no winners in a tariff war. And the problem with tariffs like this is that, yeah, fair enough, the old chicken tax lasted 60 years. But this is not a sustainable tax. This is a short-term political thing. And the trouble is, car companies plan decades in advance. These infrastructure, supply chain, this takes years to put in place. You can't just flip a switch with a few weeks' notice and make things okay. So this is going to really hurt American car makers. It's going to hurt European car makers. No one's going to come out of this smelling of roses. This is going to be a bad for everyone situation, unfortunately. I can't see a European or a Japanese or Korean company closing because they've got the rest of the world. But it's really going to hurt the US automakers themselves. But most of all, it's going to hurt the US public. So to my US-based car-loving friends, I'm thinking of you guys and I hope you get through this okay. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you're going to be affected by these new taxes, then put it down below. Let us know how it's going to hit you. Is there some upside that I've managed to miss? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, like, subscribe, and join me again next time driving something completely different.